Dwight Eisenhower, the great planner of World War II, said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." So why go to all the trouble to create a UDL implementation plan? Because the learning that this yields guides our strategic use of UDL, helping us answer the question, how do we want to use the power of UDL? Now that you've gone deep into data at your school and created school improvement goals and UDL goals to support them, it's time to bring all of these goals together into one coherent UDL implementation plan. The more tied this is to other strategic planning, the more likely it is to be useful. If you already have a strategic plan or a school improvement plan, it may be more useful to integrate these UDL goals into those documents rather than creating a separate plan. The goal is that this is an active living document, not a binder on the shelf. The areas for improvement that you identify in a school improvement plan serve as the major instructional goals within the context of this UDL implementation plan. You would then integrate your goals for applying UDL and your UDL learning goals with these school improvement areas. The key in implementation planning is to ensure that you are addressing all of the major implementation drivers. These are the crucial categories of activities that drive successful implementation. As identified and defined by the National Implementation Research Network, or NIRN, these include competency drivers, organization drivers, and leadership drivers. Competency drivers have to do with how well educators know and apply the knowledge, skills, mindset, and practices of UDL. That is not just know it, but do it. Organization drivers are all of the systems and structures that support or prevent educators and others from applying UDL in their classroom. This could include everything from the schedule to the current math curriculum to the teacher evaluation system to the contract with bus drivers to the data team with a different focus to the lack of support from administrators for experimentation. Finally, leadership drivers include technical and adaptive leadership that supports UDL mindset, practice, and a culture of iterative improvement. Technical leadership is making sure the trains run on time. Adaptive leadership is working with your team to decide where the trains are going, why they're going there, and how we're going to determine successful transportation outcomes for everyone. Let's break down each of these categories of drivers. Competency drivers are broken down into 4 areas, including selection of staff, training and coaching, and fidelity of implementation. Selection includes both the selection of team members to drive the work, the UDL team, as well as hiring with UDL in mind. Training and coaching become the heart of the UDL engine by engaging teachers in a cycle of learning, experimenting with new practice, and reflecting on the data in the form of student work, observations, student feedback, and standardized test data. The tools of the Looking at Student Work protocol, problem of practice protocol, the video protocol, the collaborative lesson design with journey mapping are all structured to support this process. Finally, fidelity to UDL is very hard to observe and measure because so much of UDL is about looking at the classroom environment differently, identifying barriers and designing options. One way of looking for fidelity would be to look specifically for those practices that the team or even individuals have decided to focus on. If the team decides that they need to offer options for perception of new information, you have a focus for your observations of classroom and school practice. Instructional rounds can be powerful for this because the process provides both a strategic focus and an opportunity for observations. Organization drivers are perhaps the hardest to see and the most difficult to change. Systems give us a sense of order and clarity, which makes them particularly sticky. They don't like to change. Actually, systems don't care. We don't like to change. NIRN defines the following areas of organization drivers: decision support data systems, facilitative administration, and systems interventions. Data systems include everything from an RTI or other data team, ongoing student assessment and reporting systems, a UDL leadership team using rounds to give another type of data, all the way to the way we track tardies and absences. Facilitative leadership focuses on leaders ensuring that policies and practices shift to support the application of UDL, including communication, decision-making, and active review of systems. Finally, systems can make or break UDL application. When educators are trying to create a more flexible learning environment, they need to be supported with flexible systems. While working hard to implement UDL in their classrooms, and after repeatedly confronting inflexibility in the systems, educators will likely just give up. Applying UDL in the classroom requires that we apply UDL across all formal and informal learning systems of a school by asking, what are the learning goals embedded in these systems? What are the barriers to meeting those goals? And how can we design flexible options for meeting these goals? For example, in a parent-teacher conference, both parents and teachers come with learning goals, knowledge and skills they want to know and be able to do as a result of this experience. They may even have learning goals for each other. Articulating these goals and finding ways to minimize barriers and create flexible options offers an avenue for full participation. Finally, technical and adaptive leadership are essential for successful school-wide UDL implementation. First, the distinction between technical and adaptive leadership is key. Trying to solve an adaptive problem with a technical solution doesn't get you very far. For technical problems, the problem is clear, the solutions require only a competent expert, and they're easier to solve. These include things like adequate collaborative planning time in the schedule, data systems that are in place, and faculty meeting agendas that balance learning and management of details. Adaptive problems require new information to define the problems, possible solutions, and implementation of those solutions. The responsibility for developing and implementing solutions is distributed to everyone involved. And finally, they're more difficult to solve. These include things like ensuring that our collaborative planning time is used strategically to advance our practice, synthesizing multiple forms of data to inform our UDL application, and designing faculty meeting content so that it is relevant for everyone and responsive to the individual learning goals of everyone involved. UDL implementation requires a mix of both types of leadership. In many cases, the most important technical solution is time devoted to practical, actionable teacher learning. And often, the most important adaptive solution is building a culture that supports iterative design, embracing mistakes and feedback to inform UDL design. If you want to dive more deeply into understanding the implementation drivers in your context, take a look at the implementation drivers self-assessment in the resources for this module. These drivers are integrated into the school domains that we introduced earlier in this pathway, but this may be an additional helpful way of looking at what is needed for school-wide change. As you pull all of the threads of your UDL implementation plan together, remember, this is an iterative process. Together, we will apply UDL in our schools and classrooms, observe and measure results, set goals based on the data, set UDL goals based on our theory about barriers, and watch new learning unfold. The best news about this kind of iterative process is that we have permission to start anywhere we think will have an impact and to start small. The sometimes difficult news is there is no such thing as done. So in your leadership of UDL, embrace and enjoy the process and support others to do the same. Asking the question we started with, how do we want to use the power of UDL? This work is never done. To quote President Bartlett from the TV show West Wing, always ask yourself the question, what's next?